Welcome back. This is Ryder Richards with Let Us Think About It. Okay. This week we're going to be doing a continuation of Richard Sennett's The Culture of the New Capitalism. And of course, if you like the show, rate, review, hop onto the website, letusthinkaboutit.com. Maybe, I don't know, sign up for membership. That would be cool, right? Then we can all read the same stuff and talk about it, have you on the show. Yeah, that'd be fun. This week, what we're going to be tackling is the Specter of Uselessness. That's right. Ghosts. That's what we're going to be talking about mostly. And why are they useless? Because they're ghosts, right? They don't really have hands. They can't carry stuff. They just wave their arms around. It's spectacular. Oh. But yeah, basically, specters are frightening because they can't do anything, but they just mope and moan all the time. And there's this kind of reflection of yourself in there. You without any agency, without hands, without being able to do anything. And no one wants that future looming over you. So back during the Depression, people wanted to work, but there was no work to be found. Instead, they were just left standing in front of shuttered factories, unable to take in the reality in front of their eyes. So the context had changed. And these haunted people, they suffered, right? Because they were without a use. So how do we remedy this uselessness? Well, let's get the workers an education. Then they'll be more valuable. Yeah, but no one really thinks, what if all the workers have an education? Then they're all equally invaluable or valuable. I don't really know, right? But then we're just back to the same problem, and now we have just more moaning people that have PhDs, doctorate zombies. So yeah, whenever we're faced with uselessness, anything can become a lifeline. And education became the armor that people sought to help them into the future. So this is a multifaceted problem here. At first, it was all about your hands, and we didn't have work for your hands. And of course, this is why ghosts are always awkwardly flailing their hands up by their faces. It's because they don't have anything to hold. Really, that would be it. They would probably be happy if you just gave them a bucket or something. But now, of course, with education as our armor, we're all educated due to public schools. Yay, socialism! Socialism and using tax dollars that actually bettered our entire population so that we have all these cool toys to play with now. But the combination of brain jobs plus hand jobs... Anyway, all this stuff has now been offshored due to globalization. So what do we do now? Even more education? Are we now just like ghost zombies with our arms flailing about, moaning words like, the psychopathology of cognitive capitalism? Well, of course I'm looking for brains to munch on while I'm doing this. And why brains? Why am I not looking for hearts to munch on? I don't, right, because no one employs hearts. But if I got some brains, then I'd be employable. Part 1. Richard Sennett says jobs are looking for skill and talent. So to be useful, we must have skills. Aw, yeah, boy. But Sennett asks, how does skill translate into talent? I don't know. I thought they were the same thing. And how does talent translate to economic value? Yeah, my parents never really framed it that way. I was just kind of good at drawing, and that talent plus hard work was supposed to magically manifest into money, right? So I drew a lot. I drew hard, and I'm pretty darn good at it, but it never really became a substantial source of income. Weird, huh? And this points out that this skills plus talent equals money equation, this kind of alchemy, well, it's really not the simple formula we think it is. Sennett says the answer might actually just be too darn complicated, involving ethnography, sociology, psychology, and of course economics. And it might be requiring all those educated zombies laden with student debt to actually just sort of be linked up into a big brain tank supercomputer. Well, no, Sennett didn't say that. That's just one of my criticisms of his book, really, is not enough zombies and brains in jars. I think it'd be a much better book then. But he does map out how we got here to where we are now. And it really starts in the Industrial Revolution, where there were basically 6 men for every unskilled factory job. So these jobs, they needed a pair of hands, not really a brain. Now, Adam Smith and others called the factory work brain deadening, which might be like zombie proofing, I guess. Like, my brain is so withered, not even a zombie would eat it. And then, unfortunately, because of manufacturing, cities became bloated with useless men who were only good for hand jobs, not brain jobs. Jeez, that came out wrong again. Early on, the masses were typically seen as mentally deficient. These were just kind of stereotyping as dumb, and they were measured by their strong backs and their hardy constitution. And really, only the occasional talent would rise up out of the ranks here. But Sennett points out that one massive miracle of modernity is to distinguish between mass and mental. The bias has been rolled back now, where just because there's a lot of something doesn't necessarily make it dumb, and mass education massively increased the mental. Problematically, David Ricardo points out that due to all this wonderful technology and advances by all these super smart people we've been educating, society may need a smaller and smaller elite to profitably and efficiently run society. Yeah, so we hit a snag here, right? The argument goes, the smarter we get, the more we invent, the less we need people, either elites or normal people. Now, this makes jobs scarce and human labor increasingly less valuable. Now, this is the thing with capitalism as an idea, is that it must always be growing and expanding and making more profit for less costs, finding easier, cheaper ways to extract resources, which really means that it's always looking for the cheapest labor. So on the news, they always talk about things like, it's a race to the bottom. Now, Sennett says this is only half right because it's half wrong. For instance, in Indian call centers, they require 2 years of university. They have what is called stretch learning to keep vast sums of data in their head to turn calls around quicker, and they're trained in human resource skills to never exhibit impatience. And of course, they're bilingual at least. And compared to a call center employee in the West, maybe except for Ireland or Germany, they apparently do pretty good at this, these people are performing highly skilled labor at abominably low wages. So the race to the bottom. It has produced high cognitive and credentialed increases in India, even though it's only really for a mundane task. So this is high talent at a cheap cost. Now, it's kind of similar in Mexico, where auto assembly workers tend to be highly skilled mechanics, who gave up the complex and attentive trade of being an auto mechanic for the brain-deadening routine of higher wages in factories. So to reframe the cheap labor race to the bottom notion, yeah, it's not really just cheap labor, right? Capitalism is after a lot more than that. It's also sucking in talent on the cheap. In India, this produces a high-skilled worker in a dumb industry, and in Mexico, it's brain-deadening the talent. So why would these talented people take these jobs? Great question, writer. Why don't you ask yourself more rhetorical questions? Just interview yourself, for goodness sake. Well, beyond a job, another facet of bureaucratic capitalism is you need to have a steady paycheck to establish a line of credit. You want a house? Get a job. And that way you can prove that you're basically boring enough to pay back a loan. As well, beyond establishing economic credit, in these places, stable factory work earns social credit or social capital. So these workers are highly regarded socially by their peers for their discipline, their skills, and their talent to capture these jobs and provide for their families. So they're not necessarily victims here, because these people voluntarily choose to participate. But then again, you might say that the game is rigged, and it's the only game in town. Now, here in America, the factory worker or call center worker has little regard socially. They're really kind of seen as on the bottom of the social ladder. And here Sennett shows that xenophobia and racism easily extends from a very real fear that the immigrant or the foreigner, with all their talent and skills, with their discipline and dedication, with their cultural and social derived worth from alternate values, well, they may just be better equipped for survival in our modern world. Part 2. Automation. You know what else creates uselessness? And lots of specters, of course, haunting the gates of factories? The inevitability of automation. Even when the corporations stay in America, such as somebody like Sprint, right? By using voice recognition software over 3 years, they cut 11,500 jobs while increasing productivity 15% and growing their revenue. Steel production from 1982 to 2002 in America, it rose by 35% while cutting jobs by 75%. That's insane. Originally, the thought was that machines would only be able to replace human hands, but in the post-industrial era, we're looking to replace the whole entire human. We went from robots such as Jacques de Vaucanson's, I don't know how to say his name. He made this flute player, which was a marvel due to its kind of lifelike similarity to a human, to this kind of, and then we've morphed now into this uncanny valley of sex dolls. But all these sort of remain in the spectacle of this entertainment arena, while technology, such as voice automation, it actually replicates basic communication. And of course, now we have cameras that swivel for surveillance to attempt to see, and they basically replicate the traits of the human head. But other technology, such as computers, these surpass humans in terms of speed, generating their own economic value because they go so far beyond human capability. And if you know anything about things like blockchain and zero-knowledge proofs, there's now ways of relating and building that are far beyond human capability. So we're going to return to this, but tech in general is a paradox where our cleverness, grown of course from our education, replaces humans. So the goal of most tech is a better life. It's to ease and extend living. Until we're all basically, the dream is to just be sitting on virtual beaches while drinking real daiquiris. But of course, we're on this curve toward this utopia. And in the meantime, though, we have a very real problem addressing this specter of uselessness. Now, this is both a psychological and social issue, and maybe, just maybe, the virtual world does provide the answer. But of course, we need to be careful not to bring our exploitative practices into the virtual, where all of a sudden Bitcoin mining begins to resemble actual mining. Part 3. Aging. So another specter of uselessness is through ageism, or prejudice against age. And at an advertising agency, Senate brings up that anyone over 40 is seen as out of it. They're set in their ways and losing energy. They're no longer hip. Yeah, like Austin Powers. But perhaps, if advertisers had to actually put up their own billboards, you might see how aging and frailty or a lack of energy might come into play, but no, right? They mostly just sit at desks. So, also, with all this increase in medicine and health and like life longevity, you pair that with cognitive labor tasks, and of course, now we can work forever. Work until you die. But this, of course, proves that physicality or even mental capacity is not really the cause of ageism. It's something else. Sennett says it is skills extinction. And this refers to the need to relearn your trade at least 3 times during your life. And this is the same for computer repairmen or doctors. So every 10 to 15 years, you go the way of the Skillosaurus Rex, unless, of course, you relearn your trade. Sennett reveals this kind of double whammy for ageism in the workplace. Retraining is expensive, and it's much more easy to hire a bright, new, desperate 25-year-old than to retrain the stable, self-possessed, and judgmental 50-year-old. The experienced worker actually, they tend to complicate the meaning of everything they work on or every task they encounter, because they're judging it, of course, based on their past experiences. Now, this is annoying to everyone, but this is actually called wisdom, right? It's the wisdom that we actually disdain so much in the corporate life, right? Because we want everything to be lighter, faster, short-term, and we don't have this long-term reward outlook. So Sennett brings up that the younger generation, the Young Turk or the Fiverr crowd, well, if they don't like a job, they have a tendency just to walk out, to exit, rather than push back against the conditions they don't like. So younger, with much less responsibility and community baggage, they bounce on to the next one, Now, this is a difference between exit and voice, where the young exit, the older, though of course the more judgmental, they give voice to their discontent, while the firms, of course, are expecting loyalty. Most of them don't offer it or reward it in return, right? So for the firm, as Sennett says, the employer's choice is clear. The younger person is both cheaper and less trouble. So I know from personal experience that in my first real job, I was a dumb, eager puppy dog, right? I was working 50 or 60 hours a week and I was taking on any responsibility they would throw at me. Yeah, well, time has taught me not to do that. And that hard earned wisdom, it actually makes me less employable. So, kids, some advice: to stay employable, don't become wise. Drawing on the lessons of the last episode, we should look at that 40-year-old at the ad agency. His or her experience is seen, especially by consultants, as being entrenched. These two have become synonymous. And basically, this is now negative, meaning that these people are a barrier to swift change. So experience is devalued. Remember as well that firms don't want a craftsman. They want talent, whatever that means, right? And that's basically the potential to learn a new skill while not actually possessing the skill. So really, it is simulating the appearance of potential as the skill you possess. This is so weird, right? It's kind of twisted. The ideal person, even as they get older, must remain full of this potential talent and must be able to easily surrender their past experiences. You must be able to give up possession of an established reality or your identity. So you must be lighter, faster, more productive, less attached. Yeah, no history, only future promise for you, man. Yeah, the person without a shadow who has also given up their voice. Woo, yeah. Perhaps you can become the Specter of Uselessness, even while employed. Wouldn't that be fun? To haunt your own workplace? An amnesiac ghost who can't really affect the world and who can't even moan. Part 4. The Public Sphere. Tying these corporate notions to the public sphere, Senate really leans into meritocracy, which we have covered fairly extensively back in step 20 and 21. But I want to do a brief recap real quick to show how this uselessness from lack of work, it ends up dovetailing with social and personal values and basically shapes them. Now, essentially, from the last episode, the welfare state is for those in need, which is most of us most of the time. And we went from the Bismarck's pyramidal bureaucracy that really gave everyone in society a place to be, even if it was an iron cage. But then somehow capital got involved, and this was because of the stability of the nation, and it was a healthy investment. Well, capital took the stability for granted, and they started wanting short-term rewards. This is impatient capital. So now we have progressed into this destabilized, decentralized capitalist ethos, and instead of an iron cage, people are now, as Deleuze may say, functions or passwords on a ledger. This is what we've been reduced to, is just lines on an Excel spreadsheet. Senate brings up how the government decidedly turned a blind eye to all these kind of problems of automation and what they were going to bring on to the citizens. And meanwhile, labor unions, they just fought for existing jobs without actually considering the shaping of the workforce of the future. Now, the founder of the Automation House, Theodore Kiel, he said, "The only remedy for true automation is to pay people for previously unpaid work, like raising children and community service." So this kind of blew me away, and as an aside, when the only good solution is to pay people for raising kids and community service, like, hasn't capital just sort of become pointless? I mean, I wonder on occasion, kind of like Jacques Vallée, where he kind of says if everything was truly automated, then the only capital left would be social capital. Well, let's just get to the point where we can bypass capitalism altogether, and maybe we can enter this new chaotic world with disastrous new problems and failures to figure out. Hooray! Yeah, but back to paying people. Our economy. Through health benefits and Social Security, it's really socialized wealth redistribution. And this goes, of course, from the young to the old. But as we live longer, fewer people pay in, or want to pay in, to a system that's failing. And of course, Europe is already experiencing this too. And under the culture of new capitalism, those in need are diminished. Corporations, they just want the talented young, not the old. They want the young who can make us money with no friction or hardship. And as a matter of fact, the young actually resent having to pay for the elderly. It's not like anyone asked them to vote on it. And this signals something else. There is a decrease in public responsibility, as each person is competitively out for themselves. So this is very selfish. And what ends up happening is they're assured through their sense of merit that they deserve their rewards. And that also means that others must deserve their suffering. Or at the very least, it isn't my problem. And you can kind of see here how a corporate ethos bleeds into civics and personal values over time. And this is why I keep referring to Boba, the Fett, or Ronin, or this kind of John Wick style assassins. It's all about the transactional value, without attachment, pro-sociopathy, and that's the new model. Now, this seems to be the ethos that most accurately portrays capitalism: a lack of social bonds or history, an exciting life of slaying others, and either a violent death or retirement in hiding due to all your previous sins and people you've hurt. Jeez, this is great, right? This life is driven by, as Sinnett says, a fear of falling. Once one is let go from your job, you're basically falling from the monkey bars. This is the broken iron cage we talked about in the last episode. Well, people work vigorously to pursue leads, but they start to become invisible to their own community. The public sphere avoids them, as it becomes socially taboo to be useless. So really, the thing is, no one wants to have that conversation. That useless person shows up and you're just like, oh man, I don't want to be seen next to this guy. He has no value and that's going to rub off on me. And thus, people become invisible. Not only have you lost your shadow working for this company, so you've lost your history and your sense of self, but now that you have become let go, you have also become invisible. In short, to remain visible is to have use potential. Uselessness is to become spectral, to merely haunt others with your unwanted presence. Part 5. The Merit Trap. So this is all part of the Meritocratic Trap. This is back when we despised the unjustness of wealth conferring position, and so we ended up weaponizing the notion of talent as an absolute and pure metric to get over this. This, of course, meant the creative or intelligent person is a person of worth, and that worth becomes moral value or moral prestige. In the end, creative or intelligent people have become superior to others. So the social way this played out, it has lots and lots of examples, but basically, to test for talent, we ended up objectifying failure. Failing the test became an internal, personal failing. The negative association was, as Sandel, Sinnett, and Michael Young all say, this is much more shaping and harmful to society than the positive outcomes were. And unfortunately, testing for or quantifying talent, this can also be pursued in a fictionalized manner anytime a firm wants to cut jobs. Ted, what have you done to earn your place in this crowded company? I arrived at work early every day and I completed all my tasks, and I put forward a proposal to save the company 3% on staffing expenses. Charisse, what have you done to earn your place in this crowded company? I've been looking into learning blockchain, Ethereum, non-fungus, toenail polish applications. Oh, Charisse, you really show a lot of gumption and promise. Totally winning. Hooray! Ted, you failed. You're a loser, and we now regard you as vermin. Security! Escort this fleshsack out. Ban him from Dippin' Dots forever. And the twist is this you've got talent search. It starts early on with the young, where we look to potential, and we test for potential, and we label kids with potential. Well, Maslow and others, in their quest to test for potential, had this kind of bleed over into biological studies where all of a sudden geneticists said that we had capabilities we had not tapped or used. We all had potential and it could be mined. Oh yeah? What's our most precious resource? Well, the population. It's now a vast oil field or a coal mine, and it just needs to be put to work producing. This also equated potential with justice, in that it was race, sex, or age blind, right? Potential had nothing to do with those. Potential was not dependent on your birth traits. It was just your ability to do well on this test. But anyone who has, of course, read anything about IQ tests or the SAT knows that this isn't necessarily true, right? Many problems come down to cultural knowledge of vocabulary. What is one binomial outcome of sesquipedalian loquaciousness? Your oratorical sonorities may be too pleonastic to be expeditiously assimilated. Correct. The mistaken notion here, as Sinnett points out, is that aptitude could be isolated from achievement. These testers, they couldn't find innate talent without any real context. And it's kind of like getting the results in the lab that you can't duplicate in real life, or it's like any number of athletes who did abysmal on the combine, and yet you're amazing football players, like Tom Brady, for instance. So when testers realized that they weren't actually testing for ability, they just ended up renaming it as potential ability. And this is kind of like alleged ability. I mean, And if that doesn't tell you how everything works today, then I don't think anything can. As Sennett says, it is process divorced from content. This purely operational thinking requires mental superficiality. And in this way, we train people for process work, task to task, problem to problem, moving from team to team. This is operational thinking. And this actually divides analyzing from believing. It ignores the glue of emotional attachment and penalizes digging deep. So once again, welcome to Liquid Modernity, where we have gone meta on everything. Part 6. Knowledge and Power. Sennett brings up Michel Foucault, who is the philosopher who really got everyone all hung up on how power works, but not like Tesla power, not the interesting kind of power, more like the discipline and punish and politics kind of power. People like to say things like, knowledge is power. But that isn't actually true, or it's not accurate, because it's not power until it's applied or used. Before that, it's just potential power. So this takes us back to potential ability and uselessness, because they're centered around types of knowledge and its use. But Sennett says Foucault never focused on superficial knowledge as a tool of power, but of course he did mention that meritocracy disempowers the large majority of those under its sway. So Foucault brought up how the elite would basically get under the skin of the masses, making them feel that they did not understand themselves, that they were inadequate interpreters of their own experience of life. Now, as a society, we went with merit over wealth, right? Which is kind of like saying talent and intelligence are better than nepotism, which I think we can agree is probably true. But somewhere along the way, the search for talent marked large swathes of our population as failures who lacked potential, while the testing itself was actually flawed from the beginning. Sorry, we mislabeled you as a failure. What we meant to say is you have low alleged potential. Yeah, okay, there. Now don't you feel better? Yet organizations, they spotted the flaws and they used this kind of slipshod ways to judge people very early on, using this kind of socially permissible metric of talent. So managers say they can spot potential or talent based on a gut feeling. Now Sennett and Jackow both brought this up. Our fix for nepotism and wealth aristocracy, it just got a different name. We just call it talent. Where the bossy basically just kind of like can stand in front of you and his gut kind of acts as a dowsing rod, or I don't know, maybe it's just Simon Cowell sitting behind a desk belittling you. But what happens is your potential ability is really a kind of a test for knowledge, and that's a kind of knowledge that has power and use today. That knowledge is now superficial processing, which is really the art of superficial ability. So these people claim things like, I can work with anyone on anything, no matter the context or the circumstances. And of course, this is the absolute exact opposite of true talent from any actual craftsman I have ever met, right? Sennett says things like, ability itself has been hollowed out, just like trust in a corporation or accumulated experience. So all these things have become empty words, empty values, empty metrics. So this is where we're just burning down the house that we live in. We have now hollowed out ability, trust, and experience in the workplace. I mean, what the heck is left? Oh, how about time, Ryder? Have we hollowed out time yet? Oh, yeah, let's get to that. With this kind of superficial processing we're doing, Sennett says we now skim. We don't go deep. And even reaching good enough is probably wasted time. So instead, we now have institutionalized impatience. Taking too much time doesn't earn rewards, thus even our reviews of our achievements are superficial and meaningless. And to this point, we never truly learn from our experiences or reify them into memory or knowledge. Sennett closes the chapter on this question. How do we find value in someone else's eyes? Well, traditionally, you look around socially and you get reflected through other people, right? And what you want to do is you want to become good at something so that you both fit in with them, but you're unique, right? So you became a craftsman, you developed a talent. But we now cull people in tests through misguided judgments. And this leaves people deeply personally estranged without any tools to move forward. They're scarred. We socially ostracize them, they become employment challenged, and without inner resources because of course we've stripped community away from them too. We remove their value of usefulness, despite whatever they might have accomplished in their life. Now this is truly the specter or the fright of being useless despite your best efforts. All right, thank you for tuning in. Just wanted to add a bit of a disclaimer or caveat here. Senate is great. And of course, this book is targeting large concepts of how capitalism has shaped the majority of society, right? For the majority of people. So, of course, while it's very easy to point at somebody who started cryptocurrency or worked really hard to start a business and they've succeeded, these are mostly outliers in our society. And yet we tend to hold them up as a shield to defend sort of a broken system of capitalism. Instead, most people find the values they were taught as a viable means to get forward in life, that these are no longer valuable. So the virtues you were taught have themselves become useless specters, useless ghosts. And in that environment, looking around for how to survive, it's maybe more important than ever that we have some sort of exorcism, right? And not to this nostalgic past that we never actually lived in and actually wasn't that romantic, but into something better, some sort of deeper and more attached meaning in the future. Until next time, stay safe.